I made a quilt, guys. It has been a ridiculously long time since I made a quilt. And while I don't think I did a bad job of making the quilt, I didn't do as good a job as I had hoped and planned for making a video about making the quilt. This started on our 2020 coast trip. And I thought I took video when I was working on it then, but all I've got is one still picture. And I thought I took video while I was over at the coast last month working on it, but all I got was a little snippet of video and not as much as I'd hoped. So we are going to splice that together and I am going to tell you the story of this quilt because I am excited about it. This quilt started with a trip to the thrift store right before our coast trip for 2020, and I found a couple of bags of scraps that I was really tempted by and decided at the last minute to run back and get them. When I went back, they were still there, and there was also a plastic bag holding someone else's UFO. For $2.50, I got our mystery quilters pieces, and it also had the pattern in it. This is Four Patches and Furrows. It's from Bonnie Hunter's website, Quiltville. Our mystery quilter printed it out on January 10th, 2009. Who knows if that is when she started the quilt. But having the pieces and the directions for what those pieces were intended to be sounded like a fun challenge. And I can't tell you as much about the assembly of the quilt as I would if it was my very own project I had made up on my own, because I don't want to mess with Bonnie's copyright. There were a lot of strips of fabrics in lights and darks. Some of them had been pieced together, some of them were just strips, and the color palette was disappointing. I have some theories about that. She repeated colors more than I would have liked to have, and I'm just going to insert she because I know nothing about the quilter who started this. So I did not add any colors to these blocks. I started piecing them at the coast and I was not having fun. They were not looking like I wanted them to look. It was boring. And I worked on it for a while and I stuck it back in the bag, and I kind of gave up on that idea until this year when I still had the bag and I threw it in the box to go this year. And we decided this year that we were going to, as soon as we got there, we were going to set up our sewing machines, set up our area, and not have any excuses to not plunge into our sewing the next morning. And the next morning I decided I would spend an hour seeing what kind of a mess I had left behind the year before. I had a stack of finished 16 patch blocks. I had a whole bunch of strips left over. And I just took the blocks that I had already sort of cut the units for and finished those and laid them out to see how close I was to done. This is what I came up with sewing together the strips that were in the bag. Hotel room here, because I'm on my coast quilting retreat. This is not a color combination I probably would have chosen for myself. I don't see the vision here. I do need to get 2 more blocks, and there are enough scraps left. I'll be able to eke those out. So the decision became, do I make a very small quilt and leave it like this, or do I add the furrow half square triangles that Bonnie Hunter's pattern calls for? I didn't want to invest more money in this for a quilt that I am not loving, but my mom had brought some fabric that she had in her stash. Basically, we took a leap of faith and cut and sewed some half square triangles. I could make it a bigger quilt if I did the setting triangles. I could use the fabric Mom had brought to make those setting triangles, and I mean, how much worse could I make it? If I hated it, I could use those half square triangle units for something else. So I sewed them and I laid them out, and I've made Bonnie Hunter quilts before. I really should have trusted Bonnie's vision because adding those triangles just transformed this thing. For $2.50 and a yard and a half of fabric that Mom wasn't going to use on anything, I think we wound up with a great quilt. The original intention for this video was to show you the quilted finished quilt, but at this point we're going into the holidays and I am just going to make the video the way it is now, and maybe I'll do a community post when the quilt is quilted and done. I made a quilt, and I made a quilt with a $2.50 thrift store purchase, and it actually looks like a quilt. I'm not as unhappy with it as I imagined I would be. So yay! I have a few theories about this. It is very possible that this was not a UFO. I know that when you're making Bonnie Hunter quilts, it is really exciting, and especially with her scrap saver system, it is really easy to go overboard and make extra blocks. I know a lot of people who have done that, so it is very possible that whoever left these colors at the thrift store for me made a full quilt and that these are her leftovers. That would explain the fabrics, I think, maybe. Or maybe she started it and didn't finish it, or started it and died and her family donated it. There's no knowing. I thought about, while I was filming this just now, I could take a picture of the finished quilt and post it to the community group and say, hey, whoever donated that, your quilt's done. That might be weird. But I'm excited by this. Since I picked up this kit, I'm calling it a kit, a UFO, a abandoned project or leftovers from a project, or whatever it was. I have found other abandoned projects at the thrift store. One of them was a mariner's compass, and at that point, I didn't think I was going to finish this. Now I wish I'd bought it, and I am on the lookout for something else to pick up and tackle and finish, but I haven't found it yet. It's going to have to be a quilt because knitting is not that versatile, and cross-stitching I would just start over on my own. Have you ever picked up somebody else's unfinished project and finished it yourself? How did it work out? What did you do with it? Did you have to add extra stuff? Did the result make you happy? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. I'm Michelle. This is my Romantic Tangle, and I'll be back with you with more videos soon.